Settle down, brother. This is the Quarter Report powered by ENCA.com. South Africa is a movie. Welcome to the watch party. Operation Dudula blames basically everything wrong in South Africa on illegal immigrants and really is trying to push all illegal immigrants out of the country, undocumented foreigners. Operation Dudula has spent many years sometimes spewing xenophobic rhetoric, sometimes spewing things that they say are facts about foreigners in South Africa that are frankly absolutely not the case. And while there are problems and challenges with migrants in South Africa and illegal immigrants, undocumented ones also, Operation Dudula has now just started breaking the law in their attempts to try and deny migrants things that they deserve as human beings, rights enshrined for all human beings, no matter where they're from in our Constitution. And most recently, you may have seen Operation Dudula rocking up to clinics and sometimes hospitals, standing outside and turning away and blocking people from getting healthcare if they don't have documentation. Now, that is just illegal. Denying somebody healthcare is just breaking the law in South Africa, whether you think that law is right or wrong. But Operation Dudula managed to score a meeting with Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi earlier in the week. And so now we need to talk about Operation Dudula's attempt to deny healthcare to foreigners and migrants. Ironically, Operation Dudula's strategy would actually deny more South Africans healthcare than foreigners, because there are more undocumented South Africans in South Africa than there are migrants, both legal and illegal. As always, you can only watch this show in full in one place, which is on ENCA.com. Click on the link in the description if you're watching on YouTube. And while you're there, there's another link to 3beaniesnetwork.com. Go and get yourself some lekker merchandise. We've got a bunch of different wonderful things in our online store. So Operation Dudula earlier this week actually managed to get a meeting with Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi, which I have to say I find extraordinary, because Operation Dudula is not a mega mass movement. It is not hundreds of thousands of people across the country. They do targeted stunts with smaller groups of people who they can rally up. They get enormous media attention because they are preventing people from getting things like primary healthcare, and they are harassing people in the street for documentation, which, by the way, is like 100% fully illegal. Like, they have no authority to do that. They have no authority to demand documentation from people. They have no authority to harass people or stop them in the street or stop them from going into primary healthcare services facilities. They have no right to stop anybody from doing any of that. In Section 27 in the Constitution, everyone has the right to have access to healthcare services, including reproductive healthcare. Everyone. That's just human beings in this country. And then and that was in Section 1 or Subsection 1 of Section 27. Subsection 3, no one may be refused emergency medical treatment. Section 2, the state must take reasonable legislative and other measures within its available resources to achieve the progressive realization of these rights. And one of those rights is right to have access to healthcare services, including reproductive healthcare. So Operation Dudula being allowed to do this is a state failing. The state should be stopping Operation Dudula from doing this with law enforcement and jailing people, or at least putting them on trial, because that is what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights requires the government to do. And the fact that the government has allowed them to get away with so much is already another failing of government. And the fact that so many mainstream media houses are now like chin stroking about whether or not people should be allowed to have access to basic healthcare, and not saying Operation Dudula is breaking the law and denying crucial healthcare to people. The fact that that is not the story is also a failing of major media, in my opinion. So somehow Operation Dudula got a meeting with Aaron Motsoaledi earlier this week. He did an interview with the SABC, and I want to tell you what he said. There's a lot of important stuff that he said in this meeting. He says, I told them they might be solving what looks like a legitimate problem, but using the wrong means. In health, we treat everybody who enters who is sick, and they can't expect us to chase people away, regardless of their nationality. It's not allowed in healthcare. Then he goes on, because Operation Dudula wants clinic and hospital clerks to turn away illegal foreigners from receiving medical care if they can't prove their identity. So they literally want doctors and nurses to turn away people who can't prove that they are South African. So Motsoaledi says, if we instruct the clerks not to give anybody a file and they go out and die, we're going to be sued. Imagine a pregnant woman who enters a hospital, is refused care, and goes out to deliver a baby in the street. And then he goes on, And this is, by the way, unbelievably important. And this is what I said a little bit earlier. So on the issue of civil registration of vital statistics, it is a problem across the entire African continent. Many African countries have not been able to register all of their citizens. In fact, according to the statistics we have, the country that is farthest ahead in registering its citizens is Egypt. In South Africa, we have 89% documentation, which means 11% of South Africans are not documented. If you look at our population, 11% would be about 6 million people. They don't have any form of documentation, but they are not illegal because they are in their country. They are South Africans. If you continue to do it the way you're doing it, you're going to turn away many South Africans who are legitimate but do not have documents. Having worked in Home Affairs, I have met such people. I have met people who are 64, 65 who are South Africans but never had documents. So I'm saying be very careful. And I'm going to add to that. It's a very important point that there are around 6 million South Africans who don't have any kind of documentation. So Operation Dudula's vision would have all those people denied healthcare. Simple, done, klar. But what's even more ironic about that, and again, this is where we're going to fight some fake news, as we do a lot here on the show. We've spoken about this before. South Africans have been misled into believing there are tens of millions of foreigners in South Africa, not just illegal foreigners or undocumented foreigners, just foreigners, which again is absurd. Some South Africans have been misled to believe that there are 15 million illegal immigrants or just immigrants in South Africa, which would mean 1 in 4 of the people on the street, 1 out of every 4 is a foreign person. Not even in Sea Point or Camps Bay during December are you going to have such an absurd imbalance between South Africans and tourists, migrants, and the rest. It's just not the lived real reality of any South African that 1 in 4 of the people you meet is going to be an illegal immigrant or just an immigrant. There have been many studies to try and figure out how many migrants there are in South Africa, including undocumented ones. And the headline finding is that no research body has ever come to a conclusion that there are more than 5 million foreigners in South Africa, both legal and illegal, documented and undocumented. In fact, the vast majority of them put it below 4 million, or like around or a little bit, maybe a little bit above 4 million in some cases, and that includes undocumented migrants. So there are 6 million South Africans around about who are undocumented, even in their own country, and legal and illegal migrants combined, they are not even close to 5 million. So the real consequence, even if you believe that people should be denied healthcare, which I don't, even if you believe that undocumented migrants should be denied healthcare, which I don't, even if you believe that South Africans should be prioritized over foreigners for healthcare, which I don't, even if you believe that migrants are the problem and the reason why South Africans are not getting access to healthcare, which I don't, because the obvious and true reason is that the government, the ANC government, has overseen the total collapse of or close to total collapse of our healthcare system. And that's the problem. The problem is that our healthcare system is buckling because of government idiocy, corruption, ineptitude, and lack of care. Even if you disagree with me on all of those points, and you think that only people with documentation proving they are South African should get healthcare services, that policy would deny more South Africans healthcare than it would deny migrants, foreigners, documented and undocumented, because there are, at the highest estimate of the number of migrants there are in South Africa, 1.5 million, minimum 1.5 million, more undocumented South Africans than there are migrants or foreigners total, let alone just illegal. And that should show you how this approach from Operation Dudula and the rest of them is absurd and counterintuitive and self-harming to the project they're trying to achieve, does more harm than good by their metrics, even if you ignore the basic rights that are enshrined for all humans in the Constitution, even if you ignore the basic belief and moral and ethical code that all humans, regardless of identity complications, should be provided healthcare.
You know what blows my mind is, we were talking about it before this recording, about that documentary on the BBC, and how you were saying that there was someone from Operation Dudula who was crying
about how much he hated foreigners.
Which I just think is nuts, man. Can you imagine shedding a tear? This is going to sound weird, but you love hating so much.
Yeah.
It brings a tear to my eye, bro. I just hate them so much.
I think you're right. You know what frustrates me so much about Operation Dudula, amongst other things like this? Look, it's the hatefulness, it's the lies, it's the misrepresentation of reality, all that stuff. It is the misdirect onto powerless people to blame them for the failings of government. But for me, that's the biggest part. And I know that there have been lots of rumors and suggestions that Operation Dudula may be funded to advance this political end. It may be a useful look over their distraction from this political failing. And there's no evidence of that, but there have been rumors and speculations about that, because Operation Dudula and also the bot campaign networks that kind of drive the South Africa First xenophobia stuff online, and all the airtime they get is helping our government to not face responsibility for, in this case, the collapse of our healthcare services.
You're absolutely right. Or the other thing that's true is the fact that then political parties are almost like taking stuff out of their playbook, you know, hauling people out of restaurants, checking if they're illegals or not, working as waiters and things in malls, as we saw, you know, going to the border, standing in a river for a while, taking some photos. You know, all of that stuff feels very Operation Dudula-esque.
You're exactly right. And it's shifting the Overton window, as we've spoken about before. So the Overton window, if you haven't listened to or watched any of those shows, is what is the acceptable conversations to have in a society at any one particular time. And it shifts all the time. The Overton window, things come into it, things come out of it. Things that were unacceptable to even consider at one point could be shifted into becoming acceptable. It's shifting that. And I know that in response to this episode, as usual with this stuff, people are going to say a bunch of things. They're going to twist our words, particularly mine, to say, Dan is calling all of us xenophobic. He's a white middle-class guy and doesn't really know what's going on in townships and communities and the rest. Two things. One, worrying about the effect that an influx of migrants has on a community is not xenophobic. I have not called that xenophobic. People whose lives are affected by immigrants in their communities in ways they don't like are not necessarily xenophobic, but many of the things that people say about foreigners are xenophobic. So there are xenophobic instances of things happening, but the way that the playbook of the Dudula types as well as the South Africa First types works is any criticism of them is xenophobic. And anyone who says, hey, that thing that you claimed was fact, that data point that you claimed, like the number of migrants or migrants are doing this or that is not true, people will say, oh, you're a xenophobe. And the second thing I'll say is, yes, of course, I'm a middle-class white South African. Yes, of course, I am financially blessed far beyond most South Africans are. And yes, of course, there are not migrants competing for my job in my community or for a house on my street. That is absolutely true. But again, we have to work with data and the factual reality of what is happening in South Africa. One's unique experience is legitimate in one's community and important for that community, but it is the extrapolation to say the entire country is like this. All the migrants are like this. All the foreigners are criminals. All the foreigners are stealing your jobs. All the foreigners are like sleeping with our women. That extrapolation is where you get to literal lies, fake news and disinformation about what is really going on in South Africa, which leads to misunderstandings of the reality in the country, which leads to bad policy in government and bad actions of government on the back of lies and disinformation, and leads to politicians exploiting that created misunderstanding of how South Africa is to their own advancement of their own politics, #Abahambe. So we have to fight for what is actually going on in the country using real, meaningful data. It cannot be that South Africans think that there are more than maybe 4 million migrants, both documented and undocumented, in South Africa. It cannot be that most South Africans think that South Africans are going through a worldwide record job crisis because there are migrants here, or like suffering a failing primary education system because there are migrants here, or not getting healthcare services because there are migrants here, because that is factually not the case. The South African state's job is to create the capacity to look after all people in this country. And of course, that means mainly South Africans. And all South Africans should be able to get healthcare and primary education and jobs and have safe streets. And the reason why we don't is because of the ANC government's failures. Though these failures have been around for 2 decades, if not longer, this kind of uptick in blaming foreigners recently doesn't track. Because if you're saying that foreigners are the problem now but weren't then, but we had the same problems then, if anything, they're a bit worse now, and it's state failure. So we have to fight for what is actually going on, and it's not enough to just say, well, you are saying that I'm lying about this point of fact that I'm claiming, and therefore you're xenophobic. In a very similar way to criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic. And it's used in a similar way to shut down any kind of criticism.